The grease trap beneath the sink had clogged again. I wiped my damp hands on my already stained apron and tried to ignore the dull ache spreading across my lower back. 10 hours into my double shift at Rosario's, and the night crowd was just starting to trickle in. "Table 7 needs water, Ellie," Marco shouted from behind the bar, not bothering to look up from the cocktail he was mixing. I nodded silently, though no one was watching. That's how it had been since I started working here 8 months ago, invisible until needed, forgotten the moment I stepped away. But the tips were decent, and Rosario's was only 3 blocks from St. Catherine's Hospital, where I spent my mornings caring for my 6-year-old son, Leo, with his shock of dark curls and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the rare times he still could. Leo, whose leukemia had stubbornly resisted 2 rounds of chemo. Leo, whose specialist had called me into her office yesterday to explain, with practiced sympathy, that his particular genetic markers made him an exceptionally challenging case. I filled a pitcher with ice water, the cold shocking my raw fingertips. When Dr. Mendez had suggested we explore comfort care options, the floor had disappeared beneath me. I'd begged her for alternatives, for experimental treatments, for miracles. "There's a trial at Johns Hopkins," she'd said hesitantly. "But it's prohibitively expensive, and the waiting list—" She'd trailed off, her silence completing the sentence. "Not for people like you." The crash of dishes in the kitchen jolted me back. I mechanically arranged water glasses on my tray and headed for table 7. That's when the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted, like air pressure dropping before a storm. The hostess straightened her posture, and Marco stopped mid-pour. The front door had opened, revealing a cluster of men in dark suits despite the June heat. They moved with practiced coordination, 2 scanning the room while a third spoke quietly to the hostess, who was nodding frantically, gesturing toward our finest corner booth. I looked away quickly, recognizing the choreography of power. We occasionally served local politicians or business executives, all radiating self-importance, but this was different. The very air seemed to thicken with tension. Only after seating the advance team did the hostess scurry back to the entrance, smoothing her hair nervously. Then he walked in. He didn't survey the room or check his surroundings like his men had. He didn't need to. The restaurant had already rearranged itself around his imminent presence, like iron filings aligning to a magnet. Tall, with shoulders that strained against an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, he moved with unhurried confidence. His hair, dark with threads of silver at the temples, was swept back from a face that seemed carved from stone. All sharp angles and unforgiving planes. A face that had never needed to soften to get what it wanted. "Mr. Castellano," the hostess murmured, barely audible from where I stood. "Your table is ready." I forced myself to look away, continuing toward table 7. But as I served water to the middle-aged couples seated there, I felt heat crawl up my neck. A primal awareness of being watched. When I turned, his eyes, dark as wet asphalt, were indeed fixed on me, his expression impossible to read. One of his men leaned in, whispering something in his ear, but his gaze never wavered. Vincenzo Castellano. I'd never seen him before, but everyone in East Harbor knew the name. Property developer, philanthropist, businessman, the public-facing descriptions that thinly veiled what everyone knew, but never said aloud. The Castellano family had controlled the city's underworld for 3 generations. "Stop staring," Marco hissed as I passed the bar. "That's not the kind of attention you want." I nodded, focusing intently on refilling my water pitcher, willing my hands not to shake. When I looked up again, Castellano had been seated, his back to the wall, giving him a clear view of both the entrance and the kitchen doors. 2 of his men sat at adjacent tables, while another remained standing near the hostess station. For the next hour, I managed to avoid their section, which Teresa was handling with nervous efficiency. But as the dinner rush intensified, Marco caught my arm. "Teresa's got too many tables. Take this to Castellano's booth." He thrust a bottle of expensive Barolo and a single glass into my hands before I could object. My heart hammered against my ribs as I approached. Castellano was alone now, his men having moved to create a perimeter of space around him. Up close, I noticed details I'd missed. A thin scar bisecting his left eyebrow, the heavy gold signet ring on his right hand, the faint scent of sandalwood and something sharper beneath it. "Your wine, sir," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. He didn't respond immediately, instead studying me with the dispassionate interest of someone appraising livestock. Then he gestured to the empty space across from him. "Pour yourself a glass." It wasn't a request. I glanced around helplessly, spotting Marco's wide-eyed warning look from across the room. "I'm working, sir. And I'm asking for your company." His voice was unexpectedly smooth, with just a hint of an accent I couldn't place. "Please." The "please" seemed added as an afterthought, a social nicety he'd learned but didn't particularly value. With trembling fingers, I set down the bottle and glass. "I'm sorry, but I can't. Restaurant policy." His mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. "I own the building this restaurant occupies. I think we can make an exception." Before I could respond, my phone vibrated in my apron pocket, the hospital's ringtone. Ice flooded my veins. No one called this late unless something had gone wrong. "I need to take this," I blurted, backing away. "Excuse me." I didn't wait for his response, practically running toward the back hallway, fumbling with my phone. "Hello? This is Eleanor James." "Ms. James, this is Nurse Patel from St. Catherine's. I'm calling about Leo." The world narrowed to the sound of her voice, everything else fading to white noise. "He's spiked a fever of 104 and his blood pressure is dropping. Dr. Mendez is with him now, but we need you to come immediately." "I'm on my way," I whispered, already untying my apron. I burst into the kitchen, searching frantically for Marco or the manager. "I have to go. Emergency with Leo." Marco appeared, taking in my panic with one glance. "Go, I'll cover for you." I grabbed my bag from my locker, not bothering with my jacket despite the thunderstorm that had started outside. As I raced through the dining room toward the exit, I nearly collided with a solid wall of fabric and muscle, one of Castellano's men. "Excuse me?" I gasped, trying to sidestep him. He didn't move. "Mr. Castellano wasn't finished speaking with you. My son is in the hospital," I said, desperation making my voice crack. I need to go to him now." The man's expression didn't change, but he shifted slightly, looking over my shoulder. I turned to find Castellano standing there, watching this exchange with inscrutable eyes. "Which hospital?" he asked. "St. Catherine's. Please, I need to—" He cut me off with a slight gesture to his man, who immediately stepped aside. Then he reached into his suit jacket and withdrew a business card, pressing it into my palm. His fingers were warm and dry against my clammy skin. "For when you need help," he said simply, then turned to another of his men. "Anthony, take her. Make sure she arrives safely." Before I could protest, the large man, Anthony, was guiding me toward the exit, where a sleek black SUV with darkly tinted windows was already pulling up, despite the no parking zone. The driver emerged with an umbrella, sheltering us from the downpour as Anthony opened the rear door. "I can't," I started. "It's faster than waiting for a bus in this weather," Anthony said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "The boss doesn't like to be refused." Too desperate to argue further, I climbed in, clutching my bag to my chest. As the vehicle pulled smoothly into traffic, I finally looked at the card in my hand. It bore only a name and a phone number, embossed in simple black text on heavy cream stock. The rain lashed against the windows as we sped through the city, running yellow lights, the driver seemingly immune to traffic laws. I closed my eyes, picturing Leo's face, praying to a god I'd stopped believing in months ago. I didn't notice when the SUV stopped, only registering Anthony's voice. "We're here." I stumbled out, not waiting for the umbrella, letting the rain soak through my uniform as I ran toward the emergency entrance. Behind me, I heard Anthony call, "We'll wait." But I was already through the sliding doors, my world narrowing to fluorescent lights and the antiseptic smell of the hospital that had become more familiar to me than my own apartment. Nurse Patel met me in the corridor, her face grim. "Dr. Mendez is with him now. They've moved him to intensive care." "What happened? He was stable this morning." "His immune system is virtually non-existent, Ms. James. The infection moved fast." She guided me toward the elevator. "Dr. Mendez will explain everything." In the ICU, Leo looked impossibly small beneath the tangle of tubes and wires. His skin, already pale from months of illness, now had a grayish cast that made my heart stutter with terror. Mendez looked up as I approached, her exhaustion evident in the slump of her shoulders. "Eleanor," she said softly, "we've got him on broad-spectrum antibiotics, but his body isn't responding as well as we'd hoped." "What does that mean?" I whispered, already knowing the answer. "It means we're doing everything we can." The practiced phrase doctors use when they're running out of options. I sank into the chair beside his bed, taking his small hand in mine, careful not to disturb the IV. His fingers were cold, his breathing shallow. "The trial at Johns Hopkins," I said suddenly. "Could they?" Dr. Mendez shook her head. "Even if we could get him in immediately, which we can't, he's too weak to transport right now." "There must be something. We're trying everything possible within our capabilities," she said, the careful emphasis making it clear what remained unsaid. The best treatments existed beyond our financial reach. Outside the glass walls of Leo's room, I could see Anthony standing in the hallway, his massive frame incongruous among the medical staff. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away, speaking quietly into his phone. I turned back to Leo, stroking his forehead, whispering the stories he loved even in his unconscious state. The monitor beside him beeped steadily, each tone a reminder that he was still fighting. Hours passed. Nurses came and went. Doctor. Mendes returned periodically, making adjustments to his medication. Around dawn, Leo's fever finally broke, and his oxygen levels stabilized, though he remained unconscious. "You should get some rest," Nurse Patel told me, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "There's a cot in the family room." I shook my head. "I'm staying here." She didn't argue, instead bringing me a blanket and a cup of bitter hospital coffee. As she left, I noticed Anthony was still in the hallway, though he'd changed position, our unexpected sentinel. When the morning shift changed, Dr. Mendez returned with another doctor I didn't recognize, older, with silver-rimmed glasses and a grave expression. "This is Dr. Klein," she explained. "He's the head of oncology." Dr. Klein nodded tersely. "I've reviewed Leo's case. The genetic markers making his leukemia resistant to standard treatments are challenging." The way he said challenging made my stomach clench, medical terminology for hopeless. "But," he continued, surprising me, "I've consulted with a colleague at Rosewood Private Hospital who specializes in precisely these variants. Dr. Sharma has had success with a combination therapy that isn't widely available yet." Hope flared painfully. Could Leo qualify for that treatment? The doctors exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. Dr. Mendez cleared her throat. "Doctor, Sharma has agreed to take Leo's case immediately, but Rosewood is private," I said slowly. "My insurance wouldn't—" "The financial arrangements have been taken care of," Dr. Klein said briskly. "We're preparing to transfer Leo this afternoon." "I don't understand." Dr. Mendez glanced through the glass wall to where Anthony still stood. "A private benefactor has made the arrangements. All you need to do is sign the consent forms." My gaze followed hers, comprehension dawning slowly. The business card still tucked in my pocket suddenly felt like it was burning through the fabric. "Castellano," I whispered. Dr. Mendez nodded almost imperceptibly. "I don't know the details. I just know your son now has access to the best treatment available. Don't ask questions you don't want answers to, Eleanor." As if summoned by his name, I saw Vincenzo Castellano himself appear at the end of the corridor, speaking quietly with Anthony. Even in the harsh hospital lighting, he radiated authority, his dark suit unwrinkled despite the early hour. His eyes found mine through the glass, holding my gaze for a long moment before he turned and walked away, leaving me with the sudden, terrible understanding that whatever he had done for Leo, it would come with a price I couldn't begin to imagine. Leo was transferred to Rosewood Private Hospital that same afternoon. The contrast between St. Catherine's and Rosewood was jarring, from the understated luxury of the marble-floored lobby to the private suite with its soft lighting and tasteful artwork. The pediatric oncology wing looked more like a high-end hotel than a hospital, with none of the institutional grimness I'd grown accustomed to. Dr. Sharma, a petite woman with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense manner, walked me through Leo's treatment plan in meticulous detail. The specialized combination therapy she proposed was cutting-edge, still in late-stage trials at only a handful of institutions worldwide. "We'll begin immediately," she said, reviewing his charts. "The first 48 hours are critical. We need to stabilize his immune response before introducing the targeted therapies. I nodded, trying to absorb the technical information while stealing glances at Leo, who looked impossibly fragile against the pristine white sheets. They'd given him his own room with a window overlooking a small garden, a child-sized bookshelf already stocked with picture books, and a pull-out sofa where I could sleep. "Ms. James," Dr. Sharma said, reclaiming my attention. "Do you understand what I've explained? This treatment is aggressive and there will be difficult days ahead." "I understand," I said. "And the financial arrangements?" She looked momentarily uncomfortable. "That's been handled by hospital administration. My concern is solely your son's treatment." After she left, I sat beside Leo, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. The nurses here moved with quiet efficiency, checking his vitals and adjusting medications without the harried rush I'd grown accustomed to at St. Catherine's. Each one knew his name without checking the chart. Each one treated him as if he were their only patient. As night fell, I curled up on the sofa beside his bed, too wired to sleep despite my exhaustion. The events of the past 24 hours felt surreal. The restaurant, Castellano's penetrating gaze, the sudden transfer to Rosewood. Nothing made sense. Why would a man like Vincenzo Castellano intervene to save my son? What could he possibly want from a waitress living paycheck to paycheck? The business card was still in my pocket. I took it out, running my finger over the embossed letters of his name. There was an answer here, but I was afraid to know what it was. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. I expected a nurse, but instead found Anthony filling the doorway, his broad shoulders nearly touching both sides of the frame. "Mr. Castellano would like to speak with you," he said quietly. Mindful of Leo sleeping nearby, my heart stuttered. "Now?" "He's waiting in the family consultation room." Anthony's expression gave nothing away. "I'll stay with your son." The protective instinct to refuse, to stay by Leo's side, warred with the reality that I owed this man, this dangerous man, at least the courtesy of a conversation. And perhaps answers. "The nurses will be checking on him regularly," I said, rising reluctantly. Anthony nodded, taking my place on the sofa with surprising grace for a man his size. The consultation room was at the end of the hall, its door discreetly closed. I hesitated before knocking softly, then entered before I could lose my nerve. Vincenzo Castellano stood by the window, silhouetted against the city lights. He'd removed his suit jacket, his white shirt crisp against the breadth of his shoulders. He turned as I entered, and I was struck again by the intensity of his presence, how he seemed to compress the available oxygen in any space he occupied. "Ms. James," he said, his voice low and measured. "Please, sit." It wasn't a request. I perched on the edge of one of the armchairs, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "How is your son?" he asked, remaining standing. "Stable," I replied. "They've started the new treatment protocol." He nodded, as if receiving a report he'd expected. "Dr. Sharma is the best in her field. She doesn't typically take new patients, but exceptions can be made." The implication hung in the air between us, that nothing was beyond his reach, no door closed to his influence. "Why?" I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. "Why would you do this for us? You don't know me. You don't know Leo." Castellano studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he moved to sit in the chair opposite mine, close enough that I could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, smell the subtle scent of his cologne. "6 years ago," he began, his voice taking on a different cadence. "My wife, Isabella, died during childbirth. A rare complication. Despite the best medical care money could buy, neither she nor our son survived." The unexpected vulnerability of this confession stole my breath. I watched his face, searching for signs of manipulation, finding only a controlled pain so deep it made me flinch. "I'm sorry," I said inadequately. He continued as if I hadn't spoken. "When Anthony told me about your situation, a single mother with a critically ill child, I was moved." The word seemed to cost him something to admit. "No child should suffer for lack of resources that exist in the world." It sounded noble, altruistic even, but instinct told me there was more. That's very generous, but I've had you investigated, Eleanor. He interrupted, the casual use of my first name sending a chill down my spine. Leo's father abandoned you during your pregnancy. You worked double shifts throughout your degree program, graduated with honors despite every obstacle, only to put your career on hold when Leo became ill. You fought for him every step of the way. The violation of having my life examined without my knowledge burned through me. You had no right. I needed to understand who I was helping. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. Your determination impressed me. Something in his tone made me look up sharply. There was admiration there, certainly, but something else too. A calculation, an assessment still in progress. What do you want from me, Mr. Castellano? I asked directly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Directness. Another quality I appreciate. He sat back, regarding me thoughtfully. For now, I want nothing except for you to focus on your son's recovery. And later we can discuss how you might express your gratitude. He said it without menace, yet a tremor of apprehension passed through me nevertheless. He noticed, his eyes narrowing slightly. I'm not a monster, Eleanor. I don't prey on desperate mothers or sick children. Then what do you do, exactly? The question was dangerous, stepping over an invisible line into territory I shouldn't acknowledge. His expression hardened. I protect what's mine. I keep order in my world. The particulars aren't your concern. I should have been terrified, but exhaustion and worry for Leo had worn away my self-preservation. If you're helping my son, it is my concern. I need to know what I'm agreeing to. For a moment, I thought I'd gone too far. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes, a glimpse of the man others feared. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a short, genuine sound of surprise. Most people know better than to question me, he said, studying me with renewed interest. Most people aren't watching you save their child's life, I countered. He conceded the point with a slight incline of his head. Fair enough. But for now, all I ask is that you accept this help for what it is. A chance for Leo to receive treatment he deserves. I wanted to argue further, to demand complete transparency about his motives, but exhaustion was overtaking me, clouding my judgment. And beneath it all was the undeniable fact that Leo was getting help he desperately needed. I should get back to him, I said finally. Castellano nodded, rising to his feet. Anthony will remain outside your son's room tonight. If you need anything at all, tell him. The implication that we were now under his protection was both comforting and unsettling. Thank you, I said, the words insufficient for saving my son, but necessary nonetheless. Don't thank me yet, Eleanor, he replied softly. We've only just begun. The cryptic remark followed me back to Leo's room, where I found Anthony standing sentry in the hallway, his presence both reassuring and a reminder that we were now tethered to Vincenzo Castellano in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. Days passed in the strange, timeless rhythm of hospital life. Leo began the intensive treatment regimen, suffering through the harsh side effects with a courage that broke my heart anew. I barely left his side, sleeping on the pull-out sofa, showering in the attached bathroom, accepting the meals that appeared with reliable regularity. Anthony was a constant presence outside Leo's door, occasionally relieved by another of Castellano's men, though he clearly preferred to stay himself. By the third day, Leo had taken to calling him the Giant, earning a rare, fleeting smile from the stoic bodyguard. On the fifth day, while Leo was sleeping after a particularly difficult treatment session, I stepped into the hallway to stretch my legs. Anthony was there, as always, though he'd ditched his suit jacket and loosened his tie in concession to the long hours. Does he ever let you go home? I asked, nodding toward the chair where he'd spent countless hours. I go where I'm needed, he replied simply, and right now he needs you to watch us. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Anthony regarded me steadily. The boss doesn't explain his decisions to me, but I've worked for him for 15 years, and I've never seen him take a personal interest like this before. The implications of that statement settled uncomfortably. How did you know? About Leo, I mean. I never mentioned him at the restaurant. The hospital called your phone while you were at our table, he said. After you left, Mr. Castellano was curious. He had me make inquiries, and then decided to intervene, just like that? Anthony shrugged his massive shoulders. He's a complex man, but he doesn't do anything without purpose. Before I could press further, the elevator at the end of the hall chimed, and Vincenzo Castellano himself stepped out. Unlike his previous visit, he wasn't in his usual impeccable suit, instead wearing dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that somehow made him look more approachable, while diminishing none of his authority. He carried a small gift bag in one hand. Anthony straightened immediately. They exchanged a brief nod before Castellano turned his attention to me. "Eleanor," he greeted me, my name rolling off his tongue as if he'd been saying it for years. "How is he today?" "The treatment is brutal," I admitted, but Dr. Sharma says his initial response is promising. Something like satisfaction crossed his features. "Good. May I see him?" The request surprised me. "He's sleeping right now. I won't disturb him. I just want to see for myself." I hesitated, then nodded, leading him into Leo's room. We stood in silence, watching the steady rise and fall of my son's chest, the monitor beside him beeping reassuringly. "He looks like you," Castellano observed quietly, same determination in his face. Even in sleep, I glanced at him, startled by the perception. "Most people say he resembles his father." A shadow crossed Castellano's face. "Tell me about him." "Leo's father." "There's not much to tell. Ryan was, charming, irresponsible. When I told him I was pregnant, he said he wasn't ready to be a father. I haven't seen him since." "He never tried to contact you? See his son?" I shook my head. "Leo's better off without someone who didn't want him." Castellano's jaw tightened, a muscle working beneath the skin. "A man who abandons his child forfeits the right to call himself a father." The vehemence in his voice surprised me. This wasn't abstract morality. This was personal. He set the gift bag on the bedside table. "For when he wakes up. It's a model car kit, something to keep his hands busy during recovery." The thoughtfulness of the gift, so specifically chosen for a young boy's interests rather than a generic stuffed animal, caught me off guard. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "That's very kind." "I'm not known for kindness, Eleanor," he replied, a warning in his tone that I didn't fully understand. Leo stirred then, his eyelids fluttering open. He blinked in confusion at the unfamiliar man beside his bed. "Hello," he said, his voice raspy from sleep and medication. Castellano's entire demeanor shifted, softening in a way I wouldn't have believed possible had I not witnessed it. "Hello, Leo," he replied. "My name is Vincenzo. I'm a friend of your mother's." Leo studied him with the frank curiosity of childhood. "Are you the one who got me the special doctor?" Castellano glanced at me, a question in his eyes. I nodded slightly. I'd explained to Leo in simple terms that someone had helped us access this treatment. "Yes," he answered. "Dr. Sharma is the very best." Leo nodded solemnly. "She says I'm brave when I take the yucky medicine." "The bravest," Castellano agreed. "I brought you something." He reached for the gift bag, placing it within Leo's reach. With careful fingers, Leo pulled out the box containing the model car kit. A vintage Ferrari rendered in exquisite detail, designed for older children but perfect for Leo's meticulous nature. "Cool," he exclaimed, his eyes lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in months. "Mom, look, it's wonderful," I said, blinking back unexpected tears at seeing a glimpse of my son's old enthusiasm. "When you're feeling stronger, I can show you how to put it together," Castellano offered, then looked to me. "If your mother approves." The casual assumption of future involvement sent a jolt of alarm through me, but Leo was already nodding eagerly. "Do you know about cars?" he asked Castellano. "I know quite a bit," he replied with unexpected warmth. "I have a collection of my own, real ones, not models." Leo's eyes widened. "Like a Ferrari?" "Several, in fact. Perhaps one day you can see them." The easy promise, the way Leo was looking at Castellano with growing admiration. It all felt dangerous in ways I couldn't articulate. This man was embedding himself in our lives with calculated precision. "Leo needs to rest now," I said, more sharply than I intended. "He has another treatment this afternoon." If Castellano was offended by the abrupt dismissal, he didn't show it. Instead, he nodded understandingly. "Of course. Another time then. He straightened, the momentary gentleness receding behind his usual controlled facade. I'll check in again soon. Anthony will remain available should you need anything. As he turned to leave, Leo called out, "Thank you for my car." Castellano paused in the doorway, something unreadable crossing his features. "You're very welcome, Leo." Then his eyes met mine. "Take care of your mother. She needs you to be strong." After he left, Leo clutched the model kit to his chest, already examining the pieces through the clear plastic window of the box. "He's nice," Leo declared with the simple certainty of childhood. "And tall." "Yes," I agreed cautiously. "He is." "Is he really your friend?" The question gave me pause. What was Vincenzo Castellano to me? Benefactor? Protector? Something else entirely? "It's complicated, sweetheart," I said finally. Leo accepted this with a nod. Already absorbed in his new treasure, I watched him. Torn between gratitude for the spark of joy Castellano had brought to my son's eyes and fear of the invisible threads now binding us to a man whose world operated by rules I didn't understand. 2 weeks into Leo's treatment, a fragile hope began to take root. Dr. Sharma's daily updates grew cautiously optimistic, speaking of promising cellular responses and encouraging blood work. Leo's coloring improved, his appetite returned in fits and starts, and he began asking when he could go home, a question that had been absent for months. "His body is responding remarkably well to the therapy," Dr. Sharma told me during our morning consultation. "If this trend continues, we might discuss transitioning to outpatient care within a few weeks." I pressed my fingers to my lips, afraid to fully believe. "Is it really working, after everything else failed?" She smiled, the expression warming her usually clinical demeanor. The combination therapy was precisely suited to his genetic profile. "We're not declaring victory yet, but yes, Eleanor, it's working." After she left, I sank into the chair beside Leo's bed, watching him sleep peacefully for the first time in months. The constant knot of fear that had lived in my chest began to loosen, just slightly. "Good news?" Anthony's deep voice came from the doorway, where he stood with his customary quiet vigilance. I nodded, wiping away tears I hadn't realized were falling. "She says he's responding to treatment, that we might be able to go home soon." Something like satisfaction crossed his stoic features. "The boss will be pleased to hear it." I'd seen little of Vincenzo Castellano over the past 2 weeks, though his presence remained a constant undercurrent in our lives. Fresh flowers appeared in Leo's room every other day. Meals from high-end restaurants were delivered regularly, replacing the standard hospital fare. Occasionally, new toys or books would arrive, each gift thoughtfully chosen to match Leo's interests, never extravagant enough to be ostentatious, but of undeniable quality. Castellano himself visited only twice, brief measured appearances where he spoke quietly with Leo about the progress of his model car, brought new books, or simply sat while Leo chatted about whatever was occupying his mind that day. He treated my son with a gentle respect that continually surprised me, listening to Leo's ramblings as attentively as if he were receiving vital intelligence reports. With me, he maintained a careful distance, polite, concerned, but never crossing the invisible boundary I'd established. Yet I felt his watchful presence even in his absence, noted how the hospital staff treated us with particular deference, how quickly any request was fulfilled. "He's coming tonight," Anthony informed me, interrupting my thoughts. "He asked if you would join him for dinner, in the private dining room on the top floor." My stomach tightened. "I don't want to leave Leo. I'll stay with him," Anthony offered, his tone suggesting this had already been arranged. "The boss thought you might need a break from these 4 walls." The thought of leaving Leo, even briefly, made my chest constrict. Yet part of me recognized the wisdom in it. I hadn't left the hospital in 2 weeks, had barely slept, surviving on adrenaline and hospital coffee. And beneath it all was the awareness that this invitation likely wasn't optional. "What time?" I asked finally. 8 o'clock. I've arranged for some suitable clothes to be delivered." Anthony's gaze flickered briefly over my rumpled t-shirt and leggings. I bristled at the implication, but couldn't argue with the reality. I was hardly dressed for a dinner with a man who wore bespoke suits to hospital visits. "Fine," I agreed reluctantly. But I'll only stay an hour. Leo might wake up and need me. Anthony nodded, though something in his expression suggested he found my conditions amusing. I'll let him know. True to his word, a garment bag appeared that afternoon, delivered by a discreet hospital attendant. Inside was a simple black dress, elegant but not ostentatious, and somehow exactly my size. Accompanying it were understated gold earrings and a pair of black heels. The entire ensemble spoke of restrained good taste, avoiding both the overtly sexy and the overly formal. I stared at the items, torn between indignation at the presumption and grudging appreciation for the thoughtfulness. There was no note, no indication of what Castellano expected from this dinner, just clothing that would allow me to feel somewhat presentable after weeks of hospital living. At 7:50, after kissing Leo's forehead and extracting Anthony's solemn promise to call me instantly if Leo so much as stirred, I made my way to the elevator. The dress fit perfectly, skimming my figure without clinging. I'd taken time to shower properly and applied minimal makeup from the small bag of toiletries I'd had Marco bring from my apartment weeks ago. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The woman staring back seemed polished in a way I hadn't been since before Leo's diagnosis consumed my life. The private dining room occupied a corner of the top floor, offering panoramic views of the city lights. When I entered, Castellano was standing by the window, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He turned as the door closed behind me, his eyes tracking a slow path from my face, down to my shoes and back again. "Eleanor," he greeted me, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the air between us. "You look lovely." "Thank you for the clothes," I replied, clasping my hands to stop their trembling. It was thoughtful. He gestured to the small table set for two beside the window. "Please sit. You must be hungry for something that wasn't delivered in a hospital container." The table was elegantly set with fine china and crystal, a bottle of wine already breathing beside two glasses. A waiter I hadn't noticed stepped forward to hold my chair, then poured wine into my glass before discreetly withdrawing. "I took the liberty of arranging the menu," Castellano said, taking his seat across from me. "I hope you don't mind." Under normal circumstances, I might have bristled at the high-handedness, but exhaustion had worn away my edges. And the truth was, after weeks of hospital food and takeout, the idea of a meal I didn't have to think about was appealing. "That's fine," I conceded, taking a small sip of the wine. It was rich and complex, probably costing more than I made in a day at Rosario's. "How are you holding up?" he asked, surprising me with the directness of the question. "I'm managing," I answered carefully. "Dr. Sharma says Leo's responding well to the treatment." "I know. I receive daily reports." He stated this as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I meant you, Eleanor. How are you coping?" The unexpected focus on my well-being caught me off guard. "I'm fine." "Are you?" His dark eyes were disconcertingly perceptive. "You haven't left the hospital in 2 weeks. You barely sleep. You've lost weight you couldn't afford to lose." "I need to be there for Leo," I said defensively. "And who's there for you?" The question hung between us as the waiter returned, serving the first course, a delicate mushroom soup that sent a wave of hunger through me with its rich aroma. I didn't answer, focusing instead on the food, surprised by how ravenous I suddenly felt. We ate in silence for several minutes, the quiet punctuated only by the clink of silverware against china. "You're wondering why I've asked you here," Castellano said finally, setting down his spoon. I looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "Among other things." A smile ghosted across his lips. Directness again. Refreshing. He leaned back as the waiter cleared our plates and served the main course, perfectly seared scallops on a bed of risotto. "I wanted to discuss your situation once Leo is discharged." My guard instantly rose. "What about it?" "Your apartment is a 4th-floor walk-up in a building with questionable security and no elevator. Leo will need continued outpatient care, careful monitoring, and a clean, controlled environment during his recovery." His tone was matter-of-fact, as if reciting items from a report, which I realized with a chill he probably was. "We've managed before," I said stiffly. "Circumstances are different now. The treatment Leo is receiving requires careful follow-up care." He took a sip of his wine, watching me over the rim of his glass. I've arranged more suitable accommodation for you both during his recovery period. The presumption stole my breath. You've what? A townhouse not far from here, 3 bedrooms, secure building, doorman, close to Rosewood for Leo's outpatient appointments, and private enough to ensure his immune system isn't compromised. He spoke as if arranging people's lives was his natural right. Perhaps in his world it was. Mr. Castellano. Vincenzo. He corrected gently. After all we've been through, I think we can dispense with formalities. Vincenzo, I repeated, the name feeling strangely intimate on my tongue. While I appreciate everything you've done for Leo, and I do, more than I can express, I can't accept a house. Why not? The question was genuinely curious, as if my refusal was a puzzle he was trying to solve. Because it's too much. Because there are strings attached to gifts like that, and I don't know what they are yet. He set down his fork, giving me his full attention. You think I want something from you, don't you? His eyes darkened. What do you imagine I want, Eleanor? Sexual favors? Some sort of indentured servitude? The bluntness made me flush. I don't know what you want. That's the problem. Perhaps what I want is simple, he said, his voice dropping to a register that sent a shiver across my skin. Perhaps I want to ensure a child who has suffered needlessly receives the care he deserves. Perhaps I want his mother to have the support she needs to focus on his recovery instead of worrying about rent or medical bills or climbing 4 flights of stairs with groceries while caring for a sick child. Put like that, his offer sounded almost reasonable. Almost. And after Leo recovers, I pressed. What then? Something shifted in his expression, a momentary vulnerability quickly masked. Let's concern ourselves with that bridge when we reach it. The waiter reappeared to clear our plates and serve dessert, a delicate chocolate soufflé that would have delighted me under different circumstances. Why me? I asked, the question that had haunted me for weeks finally finding voice. Why Leo? There must be hundreds of sick children in this city whose mothers work in your restaurants or clean your office buildings. Why did you choose us? Castellano was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he spoke, his voice was different. Rougher, with the faint accent I'd noticed before becoming more pronounced. When I lost my wife and son, I lost my future, he said slowly. Everything I'd built, everything I'd fought for, suddenly it had no purpose, no inheritor. I became reckless. Took risks I shouldn't have, made enemies I could have avoided. He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. 3 years ago, I was nearly killed in an attempt on my life. The bullet missed my heart by centimeters. His hand moved unconsciously to his left side. While I was recovering, a specialist was brought in from Boston to perform a procedure that saved my life. That specialist was Leo's father. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Ryan? But he's just an anesthesiologist. A gifted one, Castellano corrected. With a particular expertise in cardiac cases, he was part of the surgical team. My mind reeled, trying to reconcile the irresponsible man who'd abandoned me with someone skilled enough to be called in for such a critical procedure. I never knew his last name, Castellano continued. Never saw his face. I was unconscious throughout, but I remembered his first name and his distinctive voice. When you took that call at Rosario's, when I heard you say Leo, something connected. He looked down at his untouched dessert. I had Anthony investigate. The coincidence was remarkable. So this is what, repaying a debt to the man who helped save your life. Bitterness crept into my voice. The man who couldn't be bothered to support his own son? No, Castellano said sharply. This has nothing to do with him. This is about you and Leo. His eyes locked with mine, intense and unwavering. When I saw you fighting so desperately for your child, when I realized I had the power to help and no one else would, it felt like purpose, like meaning. The raw honesty in his voice silenced me. For the first time, I glimpsed the man beneath the power and control, someone who had lost everything that mattered and was grasping for redemption in the most unexpected places. So, you see, he continued more softly, your gratitude is misplaced. If anything, I should be thanking you. For what? I whispered, for reminding me that some things are worth saving. The simplicity of his answer caught me off guard. I looked away, overwhelmed by the complexity of emotions swirling between us, gratitude, suspicion, and something else I wasn't ready to examine. The townhouse, I said finally, returning to safer ground. It's temporary? Just for Leo's recovery? Yes, he agreed readily. Though there's no rush for you to leave once he's well. You can take time to find suitable permanent housing. The concession was reasonable, and the truth was, our fourth-floor walk-up would be a nightmare during Leo's recovery. Pride warred with practicality, as I considered his offer. I'd need to continue working, I said, testing boundaries. I can't become dependent on you, of course. Though perhaps something less physically demanding than waitressing. He reached into his jacket, withdrawing an envelope which he placed on the table between us. The Castellano Foundation has an opening for a community liaison. The position comes with flexible hours, health benefits, and a salary that should cover your needs comfortably. I stared at the envelope, suspicion flaring anew. You're offering me a job now? I'm offering you an opportunity, he corrected. One you're qualified for, given your background in social services before Leo's illness. The foundation does genuine good work, Eleanor. You could be part of that. The careful research into my past should have alarmed me more than it did. Instead, I found myself torn between wariness and a treacherous gratitude that he'd bothered to learn who I was beyond Leo's mother or the waitress. Think about it, he said, sensing my hesitation. There's no rush to decide. I nodded, too emotionally exhausted to argue further. I should get back to Leo. Castellano checked his watch. Of course, it's getting late. As we rose from the table, he moved to my side, his hand coming to rest lightly on the small of my back, a gesture both proprietary and oddly protective. I should have stepped away. Instead, I found myself leaning slightly into the warmth of his touch, starved for simple human contact after weeks of clinical interactions. Thank you for dinner, I said quietly as we reached the door. It was a welcome break. His eyes softened as he looked down at me. You're carrying too much alone, Eleanor. You don't have to anymore. The offer implicit in his words terrified me more than any overt demand could have, because part of me, the exhausted, frightened part that had been fighting alone for so long, wanted desperately to believe him. Good night, Vincenzo, I said, stepping back from the dangerous precipice of that thought. His gaze held mine for a moment longer than necessary, something unresolved simmering beneath the surface. Good night, Eleanor. Give Leo my best. As I rode the elevator back to Leo's floor, I clutched the job offer envelope, turning Castellano's revelations over in my mind. The connection to Ryan, the near-death experience, the search for purpose. It created a narrative I could almost believe. Almost. Because beneath it all remained the inescapable fact. Vincenzo Castellano was a dangerous man who had carved out his empire through means I dared not contemplate. And now, for reasons still not entirely clear to me, he had drawn Leo and me into his orbit. The question was no longer whether there would be a price to pay. The question was whether I could afford not to pay it. A month later, Leo came home, not to our cramped apartment with its perpetually broken heating and noisy neighbors, but to the elegant townhouse Castellano had arranged. The transition happened with the same efficient inevitability that seemed to characterize everything in Vincenzo's world. While Leo underwent his final inpatient treatments, a team appeared at our apartment, packing our belongings and transferring them to the new space. What had been a theoretical discussion became reality without my ever explicitly agreeing to it. The townhouse was beautiful, but not ostentatious. 3 bedrooms, a modern kitchen, a small garden terrace, all immaculately furnished in neutral tones. Leo's room had been set up with particular care. The walls painted a soft blue, his few toys and books arranged thoughtfully on custom shelves. A new desk stood beneath the window, topped with art supplies, and a child-sized laptop for the educational programs Dr. Sharma had recommended during his recovery. "This is ours?" Leo had asked in wonder when we first arrived, his eyes wide as he explored the space that dwarfed our previous apartment. "For now," I'd answered carefully, watching him run his fingers along the smooth wooden banister of the staircase. "While you get better?" That had been 3 weeks ago. Now, as I sat at the kitchen island reviewing quarterly reports for the Castellano Foundation, a job I had accepted with reluctant pragmatism, I could hear Leo's laughter drifting down from upstairs where Anthony was helping him with his model car collection, which had grown considerably since that first Ferrari. The transition had been surprisingly smooth. Leo's health improved steadily, his body responding to the innovative treatment protocol with a resilience that sometimes brought tears to my eyes. His hair was beginning to grow back, soft fuzz covering the scalp that had been bare for so long. His cheeks filled out, color returning to his once pallid skin. The weekly outpatient visits to Dr. Sharma brought consistently positive reports. My own transition had been more complicated. The job at the foundation was legitimate and engaging, involving community outreach programs that aligned with my education and values. My colleagues were professional and welcoming, seemingly unaware of the unusual circumstances of my hiring. I worked primarily from the townhouse, going into the main office only twice a week, while Leo was at his tutoring sessions. Another arrangement Castellano had made to help him catch up on the schooling he'd missed during his illness. Vincenzo himself remained a spectral presence in our lives, visible in the details of our new existence but physically absent for weeks at a time. I would receive texts checking on Leo's progress, occasional deliveries of books or toys that somehow always matched exactly what Leo had been talking about wanting. Security personnel maintained a discreet presence outside the townhouse, rotating shifts with military precision. Anthony had become a fixture in our daily routine, his stoic demeanor gradually softening around Leo until my son had declared him part of our family now, a statement that had rendered the massive bodyguard momentarily speechless. But Vincenzo himself kept his distance, as if recognizing that his physical presence disrupted the fragile normalcy we were building. I told myself this was a relief, that the complicated emotions he stirred in me were better left unexplored. Yet I found myself watching for him, attuned to any mention of his name, my pulse quickening whenever a black SUV pulled up outside. The sharp trill of my phone interrupted these thoughts. Glancing at the screen, I saw Dr. Sharma's number and felt the instinctive clench of anxiety that accompanied any call from Leo's medical team. "Dr. Sharma," I answered, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is excellent, actually," she replied, her typically reserved tone warmed by genuine pleasure. "I've just received Leo's latest test results, and I wanted to share them with you immediately." I gripped the edge of the countertop, scarcely daring to hope. "And?" "Complete remission, Eleanor. The treatment has been entirely successful. There's no detectable cancer in his system." The world tilted beneath me. "Remission?" I repeated, the word foreign and miraculous on my tongue. "You're sure?" "Absolutely certain. We'll continue monitoring him closely, of course, and he'll need to complete the full course of maintenance therapy. But yes, your son has beaten this." Tears spilled down my cheeks, emotions too powerful for words surging through me. After 2 years of fighting, of watching my child suffer, of preparing myself for the worst, this moment felt unreal. Thank you," I managed finally, "for everything. Leo is a remarkable child," Dr. Sharma said warmly, "and he has a remarkable mother. This victory belongs to both of you." She paused. "I've already notified Mr. Castellano, as per his standing instructions. I imagine he'll want to celebrate this news." Of course she had. In Vincenzo's world, information flowed to him first, regardless of conventional protocols. After ending the call, I sat motionless, letting the magnitude of the news wash over me. Leo was going to live. The nightmare that had consumed our lives for 2 years was ending. The future I'd been afraid to imagine was suddenly possible again. I wanted to run upstairs and gather Leo in my arms, to tell him the monsters in his blood were gone. But I remained rooted to the spot, overwhelmed by a strange mixture of joy, disbelief, and a sudden crushing awareness of debt. Without Vincenzo's intervention, this moment would never have happened. The treatment that saved Leo's life would have remained out of reach, a possibility we could see but never grasp. The sound of the front door opening cut through my thoughts. Heavy footsteps crossed the foyer, and then Vincenzo was there, standing in the kitchen doorway. He'd clearly come directly from a business meeting, dressed in one of his impeccable suits. but there was an unusual urgency in his movements, a barely contained energy radiating from him. "You heard," he said simply, his eyes searching my face. I nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in my throat. In 3 long strides, he crossed the kitchen and pulled me to my feet and into his arms. The embrace was unexpected, fierce in its intensity, his hand cradling the back of my head as he held me against his chest. I could feel his heart pounding through the fine fabric of his shirt, his breath warm against my hair. "He did it," Vincenzo murmured, his voice rougher than I'd ever heard it. The little warrior won. The simple words broke something inside me. I sagged against him, sobs tearing free after months of careful control. He tightened his hold, supporting my weight effortlessly, one hand moving in soothing circles across my back. "It's over," I gasped between sobs. "It's really over." "Yes," he agreed, his lips brushing my temple in what might have been a kiss. "Now the healing begins." We stayed like that, locked together in a moment of shared triumph, until the sound of footsteps on the stairs broke the spell. I pulled back hastily, wiping at my eyes as Leo appeared in the doorway with Anthony hovering protectively behind him. "Mom, why are you crying?" Leo asked, alarm in his voice. Then he spotted Vincenzo and his face lit up. "Vincenzo! Did you come to see my new Lamborghini model?" Vincenzo turned to him, his expression transforming with a smile I'd never seen before, open, unguarded, almost boyish in its genuine delight. "I did, but I came for something even more important." He crouched down to Leo's level, a position I'd never seen him take with anyone. "Your doctor just called with some incredible news." Leo's eyes widened, darting between us. "What news?" "The treatment worked, sweetheart," I said, moving to kneel beside him, taking his small hands in mine. "Dr. Sharma says you're in remission. The cancer is gone." Leo stared at me, processing this information with the serious focus he applied to everything. "Gone? Like forever?" "We hope so," I said carefully. "You'll still need some medicine to make sure it stays away, but the worst part is over. I'm not sick anymore," he clarified, the concept seemingly too enormous to grasp. "You beat it, Leo," Vincenzo said, his voice rich with pride. "You fought harder than most grown men I know. And you won." A slow smile spread across Leo's face, then faltered. "Does this mean we have to leave here? Go back to our old apartment?" The question caught me off guard. Before I could formulate a response, Vincenzo answered smoothly. "Not unless you want to. This is your home for as long as you need it." His eyes flicked to mine briefly. "Both of you." "Good," Leo declared with the absolute certainty of childhood. "Because I like it here, and I like having Anthony and you around." He turned to me, adding with devastating innocence, "Mom smiles more here." Heat crawled up my neck at the observation. Vincenzo's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Satisfaction, perhaps. "I think this calls for a celebration," he announced, rising to his feet. "Leo, what would you like to do to mark this occasion? Anything at all?" Leo's face scrunched in concentration, the weight of such unlimited possibilities clearly overwhelming. Could we go see your real cars?" he asked finally, looking up at Vincenzo with hopeful eyes. "The ones you told me about?" A genuine laugh escaped Vincenzo, a sound so rare I started at the richness of it. "An excellent choice. How about Saturday? We can make a day of it." "Can Mom come too?" "Of course," Vincenzo replied, his gaze finding mine. "If she wants to." The question hung between us, weighted with meanings beyond a simple outing. This would be the first time we'd left the controlled environments of the hospital and the townhouse together. A step into Vincenzo's world, rather than the carefully neutral spaces he'd created for us. "I'd love to," I heard myself say, the decision made before I'd fully considered its implications. Leo whooped with excitement, and even Anthony's stoic expression softened into something approaching a smile. "Then it's settled," Vincenzo said, his hand coming to rest briefly on my shoulder, the warmth of his touch seeping through the thin fabric of my blouse. "Saturday it is." Saturday dawned clear and bright. The kind of perfect autumn day that seemed designed for new beginnings. Leo was up at dawn, too excited to sleep, repeatedly changing his outfit until he settled on jeans and his favorite blue sweater, the one that matched his eyes, Do you think he'll let me sit in them? He asked for the 10th time as I helped him tie his shoes. The Ferraris? I'm sure he will, I replied, smoothing his wild curls. Just remember to be careful. These are very expensive cars. I know, Leo said solemnly. Anthony told me some of them cost more than houses. The thought made me slightly queasy. The world Vincenzo inhabited was so far removed from our reality, or what had been our reality before he entered our lives. Sometimes I felt like we were living in a beautiful bubble that could pop at any moment, sending us crashing back to Earth. At precisely 10 a.m., a sleek black Bentley pulled up outside the townhouse. Anthony emerged from the passenger seat, opening the rear door as Vincenzo stepped out. He was dressed more casually than I'd ever seen him. Dark jeans, a charcoal cashmere sweater, and a leather jacket that probably cost more than my old car. The outfit should have diminished his aura of authority. Instead, it simply transferred it from boardroom power to something more dangerous, more visceral. Leo flew down the steps, barely restrained by my hand on his shoulder. We're ready. Vincenzo's smile was warm as he crouched to Leo's level. I can see that. And looking very handsome today. Leo beamed at the compliment, then looked past Vincenzo to the Bentley. Is this one of your special cars? Just a regular one, Vincenzo replied with mock seriousness. The special ones are waiting for us. He straightened, his gaze finding mine, something approving in his expression as he took in my simple outfit of jeans, boots, and a soft cream sweater. You look lovely. The compliment, delivered with quiet sincerity, sent an unwelcome flutter through my stomach. Thank you. Where exactly are we going? My house in Westmore, he replied, guiding us toward the car with a light hand at the small of my back. It's about an hour outside the city. The casual reference to what was undoubtedly just one of multiple properties should have reinforced the gulf between our worlds. Instead, I found myself curious about this glimpse into his private life, the spaces he inhabited when not orchestrating medical miracles or running his various enterprises. The drive passed pleasantly, with Leo chattering excitedly from his position between us in the back seat. Vincenzo answered his endless questions about cars with patient detail, revealing a depth of knowledge that went beyond mere collector's interest. Anthony drove with silent efficiency, occasionally meeting my eyes in the rearview mirror, with what might have been amusement at his boss's unusual animation. As we left the city behind, the landscape opened into rolling countryside, dotted with estates set far back from the road. Eventually, we turned onto a private drive that wound through immaculate grounds for nearly half a mile before revealing our destination. The house was not what I'd expected. Rather than the ostentatious mansion I'd imagined, it was a sprawling stone structure, elegant but somehow welcoming, with large windows overlooking manicured gardens and the forest beyond. It spoke of old money rather than new wealth, tasteful, secure in its own worth without needing to announce it. This is your house? Leo breathed, pressing his face against the window. One of them, Vincenzo replied, watching his reaction with evident pleasure. But this is my favorite. As the car pulled to a stop in the circular driveway, I noticed the security, subtle but comprehensive, cameras discreetly positioned along the roofline, men stationed at strategic points around the property, their casual postures belied by their watchful eyes. A woman in her 60s emerged from the front door as we approached. Her silver hair pulled back in an elegant knot, her expression warming at the sight of Vincenzo. Mrs. Abelli, he greeted her, surprising me with the genuine affection in his voice. Thank you for arranging everything on such short notice. Of course, Mr. Castellano, she replied with a slight accent I couldn't place. Her gaze moved to Leo and me with open curiosity. These must be your special guests. Vincenzo placed a hand on Leo's shoulder. This is Leo James and his mother Eleanor. Leo, Mrs. Abelli has been taking care of this house since before I was born. Leo offered his hand with the careful manners I'd taught him. Pleased to meet you, ma'am. Mrs. Abelli's expression softened as she took his small hand in hers. Such a polite young man, and so handsome. She turned to me with a warm smile. Welcome, Ms. James. It's lovely to meet you both. There was something in her manner, a subtle assessment beneath the welcome, that made me wonder what she knew about us, what Vincenzo had told her about our unusual relationship. "Lunch is ready whenever you are," she continued, addressing Vincenzo. "In the garden room, as you requested." "Perfect," he nodded. "But first, I believe we have some cars to inspect." Leo could barely contain his excitement as Vincenzo led us around the side of the house toward a large outbuilding set apart from the main structure. As we approached, he pressed his palm to a biometric scanner beside the door, which slid open silently to reveal what could only be described as an automotive shrine. The space was immaculate. Polished concrete floors, state-of-the-art lighting that highlighted each vehicle without glare, climate controls maintaining perfect temperature and humidity, and the cars. Even I, with my limited knowledge, could recognize the collection was extraordinary. "Welcome to my sanctuary," Vincenzo said quietly, watching Leo's face as his eyes grew wide with wonder. There were perhaps 20 vehicles arranged with artful precision. Ferraris in signature red, sleek Lamborghinis, classic Aston Martins, and others I couldn't name but knew instinctively were rare and valuable. Each gleamed under the specialized lighting, perfect and untouchable. "Can I?" Leo whispered, afraid to even ask. Vincenzo smiled, guiding him toward a particularly beautiful red Ferrari. This one was my first, a 1962 250 GT. Only 36 were ever made. He opened the driver's door. "Would you like to sit inside?" Leo looked to me first, seeking permission. When I nodded, he approached the car with reverent care, allowing Vincenzo to lift him into the driver's seat. "It smells like leather and magic," Leo declared, his hands hovering over the steering wheel without touching it. Vincenzo laughed, the sound echoing in the pristine space. "That's exactly right." He glanced at me, something vulnerable flashing across his face before disappearing behind his usual composed expression. "Would you like to try it too?" I shook my head, content to watch them together, Leo's face alight with joy. Vincenzo's attention focused entirely on him, explaining each dial and switch with the patience of a born teacher. They moved from car to car, a pattern emerging as Leo asked careful questions and Vincenzo answered, occasionally lifting him to peek at an engine or demonstrate a particular feature. It struck me, watching them, how natural they looked together, the powerful man and the small boy, connected by a shared enthusiasm that transcended the circumstances of their meeting. There was genuine joy in Vincenzo's expressions, his usual guardedness falling away as he shared his passion with my son. "Mom, this one has doors that go up instead of out," Leo called, drawing me from my thoughts. I moved closer, admiring the sleek black Lamborghini he was gesturing toward. "It's beautiful." "This one is very special," Vincenzo said, his voice taking on a different quality. "It was my father's favorite, the only thing of his I chose to keep." The simple statement revealed more about his relationship with his father than any detailed explanation could have. I met his eyes, acknowledging the confidence without pressing for more. "It suits you," I said quietly. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight curve of his mouth that wasn't quite a smile, but carried more warmth than any smile I'd seen from him before. The moment stretched between us, heavy with unspoken things, until Leo's excited voice broke the spell. "Can we drive one? Just a little." Vincenzo turned to him, the tension dissipating. "Not today, little man, but when you're a bit older, perhaps we can take one around the track." "There's a track?" Leo gasped. "Behind the house," Vincenzo confirmed, "where I can drive them properly without worrying about speed limits." The casual reference to disregarding laws should have troubled me more than it did. Instead, I found myself smiling at Leo's expression of pure awe. "I think it's time for lunch," Vincenzo said, checking his watch. "Mrs. Abelli will be wondering where we are." "And afterward, if you're interested, there's a surprise for you, Leo." "Another one?" Leo asked, eyes wide. "This is already the best day ever." As we walked back toward the house, Leo skipping ahead with Anthony following at a discreet distance, Vincenzo fell into step beside me. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For trusting me with him today. I know it wasn't easy for you." The simple acknowledgement of my reservations caught me off guard. "He's happy," I said finally. "That's what matters." Vincenzo's hand brushed mine briefly, the contact sending an electric current up my arm. "And you? Are you happy, Eleanor?" The question was deceptively simple, loaded with implications I wasn't ready to examine. I looked ahead at Leo, his face tilted up to the autumn sun, his step lighter than I'd seen in years. "I'm getting there," I answered honestly. Vincenzo nodded, accepting this partial truth without pressing for more. "That's a start." The surprise turned out to be a miniature electric Ferrari, scaled perfectly for a child Leo's size. Painted the same vibrant red as its full-sized counterpart in Vincenzo's collection, it waited for us on a smooth paved area behind the house that served as a small practice track. Leo's face when he saw it was something I'll never forget. Pure, undiluted joy breaking across his features like sunrise. He turned to Vincenzo, speechless for perhaps the first time in his life. "Is that for me?" he finally managed. Vincenzo nodded, his expression softening in that way it only did around Leo. "To celebrate your victory. Every warrior deserves a chariot." Leo launched himself at Vincenzo, wrapping his arms around his legs in a fierce hug. For a moment, Vincenzo seemed startled by the physical affection, his body stiffening before he relaxed and placed a gentle hand on Leo's head. "Thank you," Leo whispered, his face pressed against Vincenzo's leg. Something shifted in Vincenzo's expression. A complexity of emotion I couldn't fully decode. Vulnerability and determination intertwined. His eyes met mine over Leo's head, seeking something. Permission, perhaps, or understanding. I nodded slightly, acknowledging what was happening between us. This strange family we were becoming against all odds and reason. The smile that curved his lips in response was unlike any I'd seen from him before, unguarded, almost tender. The rest of the day passed in a blur of happiness. Leo circled his track countless times in his miniature Ferrari, his laughter carrying across the grounds. We ate lunch in the garden room, a sun-drenched space overlooking meticulously tended flower beds. Mrs. Abelli had prepared a feast that catered perfectly to Leo's preferences, while still offering sophisticated options for the adults. Later, as the autumn afternoon began to fade, we explored the grounds, Leo racing ahead to discover a koi pond, a small orchard, a greenhouse filled with exotic plants. Vincenzo walked beside me, his usual intensity softened into something more contemplative. "You've built something beautiful here," I observed as we paused by the pond, watching Leo carefully feeding the fish with pellets Mrs. Abelli had provided. "It was Isabella's vision," he replied quietly. "The gardens, the greenhouse, those were hers. After she died, I nearly sold the place. Too many ghosts." His gaze traveled across the grounds. But then I realized it was all I had left of her. The rare personal disclosure hung in the air between us. She must have been remarkable. She was. A shadow crossed his face. She was innocent of who I was, what I did. I kept that world away from her. Sometimes I think that was my greatest kindness. And my worst deception. The implicit parallel to our own situation wasn't lost on me. "Is that what you're doing with us? Keeping worlds separate?" His eyes, when they met mine, were startlingly honest. "I've tried. But those boundaries are becoming less clear to me." The admission sent a complicated ripple of emotions through me. Apprehension, yes, but also a treacherous thrill of anticipation. "Vincenzo," I began, not sure what I intended to say. "Mom," Leo called, breaking the moment. "Look at the big fish. It's gold and white." The interruption was perhaps a mercy, forestalling a conversation neither of us was quite ready to have. Vincenzo's hand brushed mine briefly, a silent acknowledgement of what remained unspoken, before we joined Leo at the pond's edge. As twilight approached, Leo's energy finally began to flag, the excitement of the day catching up with his still recovering body. In the car heading back to the city, he fell asleep between us, his head eventually coming to rest against Vincenzo's arm. "He's had a perfect day," I said softly, watching my son's peaceful face. "Thank you for that." Vincenzo looked down at Leo, something fiercely protective in his gaze. "He deserves many more perfect days." His eyes lifted to mine. "You both do." The intensity in his voice made my heart stutter. "Vincenzo, Not yet," he interrupted gently. "Not with him between us. This conversation needs to happen when we're alone." The acknowledgement that there was indeed a conversation to be had, that the undercurrents between us were real and not simply my imagination, sent heat coursing through me. The remainder of the drive passed in comfortable silence. When we reached the townhouse, Vincenzo lifted the sleeping Leo from the car with careful strength, carrying him inside and up to his bedroom as if he weighed nothing. I followed, watching as he laid my son on his bed with a gentleness that belied his dangerous reputation. "Will you stay?" I asked as we descended the stairs. "For a drink?" The question was weighted with possibilities, and we both knew it. "Yes," he answered simply. In the kitchen, I poured us each a glass of the expensive whiskey he'd stocked in the bar cabinet. He took his with a nod of thanks, his fingers brushing mine deliberately during the exchange. "You've changed my life," I said finally, meeting his gaze across the kitchen island. "Leo's life. I don't know how to reconcile that with who you are, what you do." "And who do you think I am, exactly?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. I took a steadying breath. "A man with power, dangerous power, the kind that doesn't come from legitimate business alone." He didn't flinch from the implied accusation. "Yes." The simple admission hung between us. "I should be afraid of you," I continued. "Perhaps." His eyes never left mine. "Are you?" "No," I admitted, "and that terrifies me more than you do." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You've never been afraid of me, Eleanor. Not even that first night at Rosario's. It's one of the things that drew me to you." "Is that what this is? You being drawn to me? Or is it about Leo? About replacing the family you lost?" The bluntness of my question might have angered another man. Vincenzo merely considered it with the seriousness it deserved. "It began with Leo," he acknowledged, "with seeing in him the son I never had the chance to know." He set down his glass, moving around the island until he stood before me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "But it's become something else entirely." His hand rose to cup my cheek, the touch surprisingly gentle for a man I knew could be ruthless. "I want you both in my life, Eleanor. Not as replacements for what I've lost, but as something new, something I never expected to find." The honesty in his voice undid me. I leaned into his touch, allowing myself to acknowledge the attraction that had been building between us for months. "Your world is dangerous," I whispered, a final protest against what felt inevitable. "Yes," he agreed, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. "But you and Leo will be the most protected people in it. Nothing will touch you. No one will dare." The promise should have disturbed me, the casual reference to his power, the implication of violence that protected it. Instead, I felt a shameful sense of security, of finally having found shelter after years of fighting alone. "I can't just be a possession," I said, needing to establish this boundary. "Another thing you own and protect." "Never that," he replied fiercely. "You challenge me, Eleanor. You question me. You see me. Not just what I want people to see. Do you know how rare that is in my world?" His other hand found my waist, drawing me closer. "I don't want your submission. I want your partnership." The word hung between us, loaded with meaning beyond the present moment. A future I hadn't allowed myself to imagine. "Leo loves you," I said softly, acknowledging what had become increasingly obvious. "And I love him," Vincenzo replied without hesitation. "I would die to protect him, to protect you both." The declaration, delivered with such certainty, broke the last of my resistance. I raised my hand to his face, feeling the slight roughness of evening stubble beneath my palm. "I don't want to be your redemption project," I whispered. "Your chance to atone for whatever sins you carry." "You're not," he assured me. "You're my future, if you'll have me." When his lips finally met mine, it felt like an inevitability, as if all the paths of our lives had been leading to this moment. The kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. When I responded, his control slipped, the passion he typically kept leashed breaking free as he pulled me against him, one hand tangling in my hair. We broke apart, breathless, foreheads resting against each other. The vulnerability in his eyes was something I suspected few had ever witnessed. "Stay," I whispered. His answer was another kiss, this one a promise of all that would follow. the joining of our separate lives into something neither of us had imagined finding. A family forged from the most unlikely circumstances. In the morning, Leo found us together in the kitchen, Vincenzo making coffee while I prepared breakfast. He paused in the doorway, taking in the domesticity of the scene, something wise beyond his years in his expression. "Are you going to be my dad now?" he asked Vincenzo directly. Vincenzo set down the coffee pot, crouching to Leo's level as he always did when they spoke. "I would be honored," he said simply, "but only if that's what you want." Leo considered this with characteristic seriousness. "I think it is," he decided. "But you have to promise something. Anything," Vincenzo replied, and I knew he meant it. "Promise you'll never leave us like my first dad did." Vincenzo's eyes met mine over Leo's head, a lifetime of commitment in his gaze. "I promise," he told Leo. "You and your mother are my family now, and I protect what's mine." As Leo launched himself into Vincenzo's arms, I watched the man who had saved my son's life, this dangerous, complex man who had somehow become essential to us both, embrace our future with the same determination he approached everything else. Some might call it Stockholm Syndrome, this strange love that had grown between us. Others might say I'd made a deal with the devil. But watching them together, seeing the genuine love Vincenzo had for my son and the healing his presence had brought us both, I knew the truth was both simpler and more complicated. We had saved each other in the end.